Welcome back to the Talking Hedge. I'm Josh Kincaid, and this is your Cannabis Business Podcast. Today, we're going to talk about CBD, an executive order in Washington State banning flavored vapes, a couple other CBD topics. On the line with us to dive through all of that, Michael Schroeder with The Aging Ent. Thanks for being on.
How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Thank you. I'm good. Thanks for having me, man. I'm excited. This is some pretty interesting stuff to talk about.
This is going to affect the entire industry. It's kind of been a huge collapse with this vaping debacle. So before we get into what dabbing is and the importance of oil and how to limit coughing and some of these other things, I want to get into a serious topic about an executive order that just happened yesterday in Washington State. So I'm going to read this off and then we're going to dive into it. It says that it's a policy of the state of Washington to support the health, safety, and well-being of all Washingtonians. Vaping devices, also known as e-cigarettes, Juul, or vape pens, and the vape juice or concentrates used with them can contain nicotine, THC, or other substances like flavoring or chemicals. The appeal of flavored nicotine vaping products, as well as advertising and promotional activities, targeted youth, are contributing to the dynamic increase in youth vaping, and there's no manufacturing standards for non-THC vape products, and some vape products are sold as open containers, which allow for the addition of broad range of substance to the vape products without regulatory oversight or full user knowledge about the content or impact of the substances being consumed. So consumers who can choose from over 8,000 e-liquid flavors to use with their vaping devices, some of those flavors can damage lung cells and may play a role in addiction. No one substance has been identified as the cause of these vaping-related lung injuries. If or when the specified ingredients or compounds causing this related lung injury are identified, the state has no viable means to identify which vape products are for sale in Washington State contain the injury-inducing substance so that these products can quickly be removed from the market. So what are they going to do, Michael? There's a couple of things that they've laid out. There's emergency rule to ban flavor products. They immediately banned anything identifying the cause of the outbreak. There's consumer warnings that they're going to have to add to labels, ingredient disclosures. They have a provider reporting, educational campaign, legislation. But immediately it's identifying and banning all of these things. So it's going to impact the entire state, like ASAP.
So just to clarify, they're banning all vaping devices with any sort of flavoring or all substances. And it sounds like the emergency rule is actually requesting that the Department of Health use their authority to do that. I'm confused. I'm totally am, because it specifically mentions non-THC vapor products are going to have a requirement for consumer warnings.
Right. So there's several regulators. There's the Department of Health, there's the Liquor and Cannabis Board. And so there's all of these people getting ready to do something, but they don't know what it is.
And where cannabis is involved, the DOA too, ag is involved as well in a weird way, because the law doesn't say they are, but it's an agricultural product. So the law does say they are.
I saw an interesting thing on Facebook where it says, grab your vape carts now before they're kind of pulled off the shelf. Do you kind of see a discount from the retailers kind of just liquidating this before, the shit hits the fan?
I mean, I don't see that, because there's not a whole lot, no matter what people think, there's not a whole lot of play in what cannabis costs, right? I mean, retailers have some room, but there's so many impactors there where discounting prices on things is almost not doable in a lot of ways. I don't know how much your listeners are familiar with things like 280E, which is the federal tax law that disallows anybody in the cannabis industry from taking normal sorts of tax cuts that small businesses can do. And so without the leverage that sort of thing brings, cannabis businesses are on tight margins, unlike other small businesses and retailers. So yeah, I bet there's going to be some sort of discounting. It's not going to be good for the industry. And I think that a lot of people are going to go to the last day selling at full price because they've got to.
That's if it's their choice. Could be up to the retailers. What's some of the other fallout that you expect? My anticipation is that people who don't have enough SKUs to support staying in business, if their main thing was oil, they're going to be really struggling if they're not in other states or other categories. What's some other fallout that you expect?
I mean, not just looking at the cannabis industry only. I mean, I've got quite a few friends who are in the tobacco industry with the vape industry, pushing straight up nicotine-based vapes. And this is, I mean, I know 5 people independently who are going to lose their businesses because they can't sell flavored vape juice because it's 90% of their business model.
Mm-hmm.
Another fallout here is that there's going to be a lot of finger pointing until there's a real, decisive, medically clear reason why these health crises are happening, which there already is. It's vitamin E acetate, hands down. But until that's proven medically, there's going to be a lot of finger pointing. And it may, as this executive order says, they're claiming some of the chemicals might be causing it, the flavoring agents, which is totally true. Diacetyl acid, which tastes like popcorn, buttery popcorn flavoring, that stuff actually has been shown conclusively to lead to the actual condition popcorn lung. And that's in our microwave popcorn still, but it was banned out of vaping 4 or 5 years ago, but you can still get it. If you go get microwave popcorn, it's got diacetyl acid in it. We know it causes popcorn lung, but you can still buy it in that form, but you can't find buttery popcorn flavored. OG Jelly Bellies too used the same thing, diacetyl acid, and they took it out. So the fallout is going to be huge. The e-cig vaping industry, not just for cannabis, but the e-cig vaping industry is big. Mm-hmm. Do you have any ideas yourself, Josh, on like really where, like, have you looked at kind of what looks like where this whole vaping crisis has sourced from and how it came across?
The timing is really interesting. If it were centralized, it would make sense. But the fact that you have California, Illinois, New York, it's really kind of hard. But the thing that you're able to point out is the vitamin E acetate. There was a pulmonologist in North Carolina that mentioned bronchitis-like effects from lipids and fats. And that kind of raised a little bit of a question for me is if we dab, wax, shatter, or anything that has, not shatter, but something that has a higher lipid fatty content in it, isn't that maybe going to cause some same thing? Yeah. I mean, the timing of it all, I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but the timing of it is going to create a massive amount of regulatory roadblocks and hurdles. And we had another guest on previously who said it's going to line Juul up really, really well to be the maybe sole distributor and supplier of pods that are regulated and protected. But I don't know how it came about, but the timing is interesting.
I am not everything is a conspiracy theory, but within the course of 4 years, the brand behind Marlboro decides, they want to jump in the game, creates Juul, that's Altria Brands, they're the makers of Juul, saturated the market incredibly, and as soon as they reached peak saturation point and people were being concerned about it, this other much larger level thing came about. And who is the government going to ask to step in to control this public health problem? Is it going to be small business owners, the 3,400 licensed business owners in Washington with cannabis businesses? Or is it going to be big old corporation with $2 billion worth of lobbying every year behind it, their facilities that can be trusted? I think you're right. They may end up being the only nicotine pod producer out there. And Altria Brands is right on the edge of joining in the marketing in the cannabis industry. They've invested in Canada, in the cannabis industry there, and they're waiting for federal. They are. They're purveyors of tobacco, death poison. They want the happy smokables. It could be a crazy conspiracy theory. It could just be layers of coincidence that more people are vaping, more people are cutting their vapes. Yeah, it's hard to really be sure.
You can follow the money. Big Tobacco's been in Israel for a long time. They've invested in Juul. They've invested in Canadian cannabis companies. So, I mean, it's official. But Washington State is about just as regulated and controlled as any other banking or tobacco or any other high regulated industry. But to your point about other legalities in Washington State, we have a Class C felony on maintaining and operating cannabis cafes. I'm on a committee to try and overturn that felony and allow for that. So we're finishing up a bill this week, and hopefully we'll be allowed to vape and smoke outside at an actual cafe. And so that brings up this last point about investors seeing the next big wave in precise dosing. want to ask you about, your favorite way to consume. But right now, like in 2019, we're seeing the second largest investment vehicle being data, and a subset of that data with technology is accurate dosing. So whether it's using your smartphone and apps, and then utilizing AI assisted algorithms, we're seeing that the importance of microdosing and accurate dosing being a huge wave. So when you're taking something like CBD, you should know what you're doing. I like the technology side behind it. So where are you kind of seeing the next wave of consumption devices? What are people going to be using? And in the eventuality that cafes are legal, what do you think is going to happen? What toys are you going to see?
Well, it's definitely not going to be traditional joints, right? That's just a reality. So it's funny that we're talking about e-cigs now. 7-8 years ago, I started vaping e-cigs and made a little device that got a little headway in that industry. And then I saw all sorts of restrictions coming my way, and I turned and ran, And I think that the innovation in vaping spaces took a lot of pioneer minds. So I think that we're at that point where all the pioneers are working together. Everybody's already walking around with some sort of vape in their pocket, right? Like, everybody, have you ever been to a restaurant? This happened to me twice so far, and the waitress handed me the check and her vape pen.
No, I've given them joints and blunts though as tips.
Oh, for sure.
They've never given me vape pens.
So, well, like she thought it was her pen because everybody's got one on them. CBD vape pens all over the place. In other states, my mother's in Arizona. My aunt's with her. They're both medical marijuana patients. Two old ladies who go into the pot store and just get everything they possibly can, right? And it's so I think the biggest thing they're using, they're vapes. They can be everywhere. They are everywhere. Kids, and it's problematic. It can be problematic where everybody's around getting intoxicated if that's what they're doing. But to the point of CBD, that is the way of consumption. It's going to be CBD distillate. And frankly, I don't care right now if the FDA comes out and says, nope, there's no more flavored vaping. People are still going to find ways to vape CBD and THC in a flavored manner because it's a huge product. It's got a draw. There's appeal. People are going to do it. This is literally like the old guard of pharma and tobacco trying to get in the way of innovation in this space. And whether it works short-term or even long-term, it's not going to have the intended impact, just like prohibition of cannabis didn't. People now know that you can vape CBD with a little bit of terps, and your life is better because of it. Your
life is going to be better for listening to Talking Hedge as well. So, Michael Schroeder with The Aging Ent, where can they reach you on social media? How can they find you?
You can check me out at The Aging Ent with an underscore on Instagram, The Aging Ent on Facebook, and I've got hundreds of cannabis reviews out of Washington and Oregon at agingent.com.
Check it out. So with that, we're going to roll this one up. I'm Josh Kincaid. This is The Talking Hedge. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, or don't. And I'm out.
Very cool. This was fun.